Are we ready to get started?
We
Yes.
are.
Okay. Hello and welcome to Rails Burr Ridge Service Center. I am Laura Turner, Vice President of the Rails Board, and I call this meeting to order on Friday, October 27th at 1 p.m. Emily, will you call the roll?
Sure. Christine Barr.
Here.
Dave Barry.
Here.
Sue Busenbark.
Here.
Judy Crocker. Judy? See you.
Is that her?
Yeah, she's there.
Oh, okay, I see her.
Gwen Gregory. Oh, she's not here yet. Kate Hall. Paul Mills.
Here.
Scott Poynton.
Here.
Dee Runnels. Nadia Shake.
Here.
Michelle Simmons. Joe Skabinski. Laura Turner.
Here.
Lori Wilcox.
Is the phone connected?
Yes.
Okay.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to recognition of guests and announcements. Let's start in Burr Ridge with guests. Any guests in Burr Ridge?
Yes.
Sorry.
Ann Slaughter, Rails.
Veranda Pitchford Rails.
Jim Krieger, Rails. Joe Philippek, Rails.
Mary Witt, Rails.
Ryan Heppel, Rails. Martin Warfield, Rails.
Mark Hatch, Rails.
Brock Spencer Rails.
Amanda Masaccio, Rails.
Deborah Aggard, Illinois State Library.
Greg McCormick, Illinois State Library.
Dee Brennan.
Emily Feister, Rails.
Okay, thank you. Any guests in Bolingbrook? Cole Valley?
I don't think anybody is in Bolingbrook at all, Laura.
Okay. Is anyone in Cole Valley?
I
No.
don't think so.
East Peoria?
Class, Rails.
Bill Kamenecki, OSF.
Kendall
St. Francis.
Orison, Rails.
Thank you. Rockford?
Nope.
Vernon area. Oh, sorry. Do we have a Rockford?
I just said, no, I was just saying there's no one there.
Okay. How about Vernon?
They are,
Nope.
they're trying to connect.
Okay. I'll go back to them at the end. Illinois State Library?
Hi, this is Karen Egan from the Illinois State Library.
And Gwen Harrison at the Illinois State Library.
Thank you. Anyone in Galesburg? That looks like a no. All I see is an empty table. Anyone in Quincy?
Nobody.
Hi, Judy.
Hi.
And sorry. And did the Vernon Area Public Library District get connected?
Not yet.
Okay. Should I move on to the adoption of the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, may I have a motion and a second for adoption of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All right, so Paul moved and Dave Barry seconded, so that's good. We're good.
Okay. So do I, all in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no?
Hi, this is Dee Runnels.
Motion carries. Oh,
Hi, Dee.
Hi, Dee.
so I think we had a motion carried on adoption of the agenda.
Yes, you did.
Okay, so we will move on to approval of Rail Board minutes, financial reports and expenditures. May I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of the September 22nd, 2017 Rails Board meeting?
I move that we approve the minutes as presented. Or I'll
Second? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next, we will have the Rails financial report. Jim, can you give the report?
I certainly can. Good afternoon, and you have the Rails financial report for the month ended September 30th in your packets. A few highlights. The unassigned general fund cash balance at the end of the month was $10.9 million, and it would fund just under 1 year of operations. We still have not received the $3,962,120 of last year's allocation, but we did receive our federal funds money for fiscal year 18 in 2 checks this week, Monday and Wednesday, totaling $1,936,143 and change. So that's a little bit more than 2 months of coverage, and that puts us over the 1 year mark. So hopefully there will be more to follow. Through September, our revenues were below budget as no area and per capita grant revenues had yet been recorded since they hadn't been received yet. Our expenditures, general fund, were $244,298 under budget, of which over half were personnel expenditures, just under $142,000 under budget, and $82,000 of that were salary expenditures. And that is mostly in part because of not filling vacant positions and not replacing positions that have been vacated. Our health, dental, and life insurance expenditures were $11,708 budget, below budget through September. They should remain below budget. As for next year, we are receiving no increase on our health insurance from Limerick, so the rates will stay the same. So we feel real good about that. One thing I wanted to also mention is last year the board authorized us to adopt a health reimbursement program in which we converted everybody who was on the low deductible, the 500 deductible, we had them convert all to the 1500 deductible, and the HRA program pays the deductible incurred between $500 and $1,500. And the benefit to Rails of that is that we would get lower premiums because it's on a higher deductible, and partially offset by picking up that deductible incurred. So it appears that for this year we'll achieve about $26,000 of net savings from that program, and so we obviously are continuing that. Are also on the liability insurance and workers' comp. I'm not going to say any numbers yet, but the outlook is very good for next year's rates, and we will be meeting in about 2 weeks with the LIRA people and get our specific rates. But it's a very good outlook, and they will be below last year's rates, which in turn were 7% below the rates before. We also will be. I will be taking home a check to Rails, not me.
You had me there for a minute.
From this
State library.
just over $18,000, which I'll deposit to Rails, and that represents a refund of 38.6% of our first year contribution to the self-insurance fund from LIRA. So the plan had been LIRA to start returning funds that were unused in their self-insurance pool after a 3-year period, and this will be the first reimbursement. And as of now, it looks like we'll be getting reimbursements every year. So that will partially offset our insurance costs, which in turn are going down. I also noted our supplies, posting, and printing expenses went above budget because we made some furniture purchases of $44,000 that were not, that didn't meet the capital expenditure threshold, so we have that. Also, in the capital funds expenditures, there was no activity for September, but we do expect to get a final bill for the project any day now, and it was within our budget and our contract. So can I answer any questions?
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, thanks, Laura.
Yeah.
No, if I could just add something to what Jim noted, Lyra originally started with 23 member libraries. With new additions this year, we will be up to 50, so more than doubled our size, which increase our opportunities to provide more cost savings for Illinois libraries. I'm really, really proud of that, and really glad that Rails is a member of Lyra as well.
Yes. It's been great for us in every way. Yep.
May I have a motion for approval of the financial report for September 2017?
So moved.
Second.
Second? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? No. Motion carries. And Jim, now for the expenditures?
The next item is the approval of the September expenditures. This is listed at the back of the financial report. The amount is $854,034.35. Are there any questions on the detail of that? Pretty much a normal month's spending.
I'm just kind of curious, Jim, it looks like under professional services, under legal, it was just $245 to date spent, but am I reading it right? Was there 0% budgeted? $0 budgeted, I mean?
Well, are you back at the financial report?
Oh, maybe I'm on the wrong section here. Quite possibly.
What page are you on?
Statement of revenues and expenditures. Document 6.2-6.3. There's no page number.
Yeah.
Page.
It's at the top. Where are you?
I'm right here.
And you, and
The first line is equipment rental, repair and maintenance. At the top of the page, it's about a half
Yeah.
page.
So the next section down, professional services. We're legal and consulting.
Well, the legal expenses
I see
total are
1,200
210.
this year. I mean, this quarter. Are you looking at? Are you looking?
Are you looking at delivery?
Are you looking at delivery, or are you looking at the governmental
Oh, I'm on
funds?
delivery. I'm
Okay,
sorry, I'm on
that's
delivery.
okay.
All right, never mind.
That's-
Charged on delivery.
Yeah.
Got it, all right.
Okay. Back to the expenditures for the month. Shopping.
Any other questions on expenditures? Okay, so may I have a motion for approval of the check voucher register for September 2017 in the amount of $854,034.35?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Emily, will you please call roll?
Sure. Did we have someone else join us on the phone?
Joe
it just
Skibinski
still-
just got in.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joe. Okay, Christine Barr.
Yes.
Dave Barry.
Yes.
Sue Busenbark.
Yes.
Judy Crocker.
Yes.
Gwen Gregory. Paul Mills.
Yes.
Scott Poynton.
Yes.
Dee Runnels.
Yes.
Nadia Shake,
Yes.
Joe Skibinski,
Yep.
Laura Turner.
Yes.
Thanks, Jim.
Oh, sorry. Motion carries. On to reports. Okay, report 7.1, report from the Rails president. Kate, nor I have anything to report, so we'll move on to committee reports. Paul, anything from the consortia committee?
Thank you, Laura. The consortia committee did meet earlier this month, and there is actually an item later on the agenda, so I will just save that part of the conversation regarding the overlay project for 9 unfinished business. The consortia committee also did talk about a recommendation from the working group for developing a funding formula for the consortia and Rails, and Rails staff will be continuing work on that. I don't know, Dee or Jane, if you guys want to provide any more detail on that item.
Well, there were recommendations, as I think the board will remember, there were the consortial model working group was established to look at future funding of the LSAP/consortia. They did develop recommendations in terms of level funding of the LSAPs in FY19, and then moving to a sort of a grant, an annual grant after that, based on criteria that we've discussed with the consortia committee. So we'll be working on that in this year, and reporting back to the board when we have more, something approaching a formula. And let's see, Gwen's on the committee now. I know you're chewing. I don't know if you want that. And I don't know if Jane wants to add anything either, but it's a work in progress. Yep.
Yeah, that summarizes it well.
Okay, we will move on to the delivery committee. Dee, is there anything from the delivery committee?
No, they have not met. We will be discussing the charge later, along with a couple of other committee charges, but that is it for now.
Okay. For the executive committee met, and the report will be given under new business. As for the policy committee has not met, but will meet in the near future to discuss some benefit changes and possibly review the meeting via electronic means policy. Okay, we will move on to Rails reports.
All right.
Dee, do
Thank
you
you,
want to
Laura.
start?
Yes,
You're
thank you
welcome.
very much. Thank you. Sorry, the delay is very annoying.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have my executive director report. I would point out that on the back page of that is a very small typed Rails facility summary. We like to provide this to the board on just as an update, at least annually. This just shows you the buildings that we own and lease, and the sort of the status of the lease, the staff that are in those buildings, what the rent is, and any sort of issues or projects. We just want you to know, as real estate tycoons, what's out there. I have Coal Valley is on the market, has been on and off the market since the merger, and apparently even before that I learned recently. And we've definitely had some interest in it, but nothing formal has happened. So this is just information, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and I know Mark is as well, about the facilities. some of you have been to Coal Valley now. Some of you have been to East Peoria. I don't imagine you've been to Rockford or Bolingbrook.
Dee, do we still have the lease on the other building in Rockford, the original Northern Illinois Library System building, or is that lease and sublease ended?
Did that just finally, just this summer, right?
Okay.
This June 30th. Yeah, that was a long lease.
But it was a revenue source for us.
Yes,
at the
it was,
end. Yeah.
because we sublet it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it turned out to be a good thing, at least for a while.
This is Laura. in East
I don't-
Peoria. Oh,
Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment about the East Peoria facility. I noticed when I drove in today, they repaved it, so the giant pothole when you made the turn in is now gone. So I no longer have to try to avoid it with my vehicle. So that was nice this morning. It's much nicer.
Good. Well, of course, that can be one of the problems with being a tenant. So
Right.
I'm glad to hear the landlord came through.
They did.
So I don't have anything else to add in my report. I had a wonderful vacation. Thank you all very much for your support and permission and going. And but it's good to be back. And I want to thank the staff again too for, of course, keeping things going extremely well while I was gone, especially Jane. Thank you, Jane, again. Any questions? Then I will go to the operations report. I guess I did want to just give you a little update on the standards. We are getting ready we've been working on the testing as the board asked us to do when they approved the draft standards in June. And we are recruiting libraries, and there's a lot of libraries that are interested in being part of the test, which will take place probably from starting in the middle of November. And basically the test consists of, that's the royal we, have developed a checklist that we think will be very easy to fill out to determine that if the libraries meet what standards. And we would invite board members, libraries to participate if they're interested. And I can certainly email you all about that, or we can figure that out after the meeting or in email if you want to do that. And you also have the consortial reports. At every consortium meeting, we get written reports from the consortia, and then we include these in the board packet during the month that those meetings take place. We've got a lot of information there. Does anybody have any questions? Apparently not. Thank you. Back to you, Laura.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Today we are happy to have Greg McCormick in attendance at Burr Ridge. Welcome, and thank you for making the trip. And we'll move on to the Illinois State Library report.
Well, thank you. Deb and I are glad to be here today, and joining us in Springfield are obviously Karen and Gwen. So I think a few things to keep in mind. I know that Jim spoke a bit ago in the financial report about the money that we still owe the library systems. And in fact, we owe many, many libraries in the state money at this point. As of yesterday, I did not look this morning before we departed, the bill backlog was at $16 billion. There have been a number of bond sales in the past couple of weeks that are to address part of this backlog, And the idea also was that the state would then be able to use some federal funding that they had available to address the backlog. As we come to you today, we can't say when you're going to get that payment yet. In theory, it has to occur before December 31. What wasn't part of the financial report, I guess, but maybe some of you do know, we sent you part of your FY18 money, almost $2 million in the past couple of weeks. So that has been received. That was federal money because the system is funded with both state and federal funding. As far as FY18 is concerned, we're continuing to move forward with the fiscal year as planned. There has been discussion, in Springfield with the governor's office and some of his agencies that he might be calling in legislators and cutting back some of the funding that has been appropriated to them. But as of this time, we don't know anything about that for our agency, and we're moving forward with the grant programs as planned. We just received the school library per capita grant applications at our office, have begun processing and analyzing those. The one comment about that program, and it extends on into library system membership as a whole, we were very concerned with the due date, and we did see a number who did not apply this year, and reached out to them. And it isn't necessarily a matter of they would not have applied. A lot of the reason we're being given right now from the school libraries is between March, when they certified, and October 15, when the applications were due, there is no school librarian. Which,
they've lost people in
yes, which is problematic for the system as a whole too, because that will become another issue for you in January. And I know, Veranda, you'll be dealing with this as much as anyone, and anyone who's interested in the school libraries. But it's a significant enough number it's worth mentioning to you. It's not hundreds, but
Can you give us the list?
sure, we can do that when we get back.
We haven't finalized it yet.
So
Great. We can start with, we like to pre-game on certification.
Sure.
Get to those first.
So we were literally looking at every email we had received regarding that grant application to see where we were. So we'll be reviewing that more closely. Moving forward, of course, public library per capita grants. Again, the majority of the public libraries have not been paid in this state yet for FY17. Those applications are out there, though, for FY18. They will be due January 15. The Live and Learn Construction Grant Program, those applications are out as well, also due mid-January. And of course, we encourage everyone to please apply for these grants. I know there's a huge frustration level with non-payment, but it certainly does demonstrate that there's a need for this funding still within the state, and lack of interest would not serve our programs well. So everyone, I think, who was at the Library Association Awards Luncheon heard the Secretary speak about talking to your legislators, relaying the importance of these programs to them, and assure that funding is still allocated. So your participation in them is very, very important. A few other things that are upcoming. Certainly we're in the midst of reviewing the library system annual reports that were just received September 30th from the library systems. Certainly we will look very closely at the focus on and expenditure levels, because we're very interested right now on delivery, on what we're doing collectively as resource sharing across the state. We still go back to the primary reason, the first parts of the Law and the System Act. It is about resource sharing amongst libraries, and so we'll still be looking at that very closely. And I think for planning For FY19, you've already spoke about your commitments to the consortia. If the board is beginning and the staff here is beginning to think about what would be implemented in FY19, that you'll be looking towards that focus still, because I think that's going to remain throughout, certainly as the highest of priorities for FY19. We have just submitted the initial draft of what would be the FY19 budget bill. Our plan would be sustaining system funding, sustaining all library programs as what we have now. We feel very fortunate to be taking this back to what we had in FY15, and while maybe some may view that as not optimum, it's certainly higher than many, many other recipients of state funding are seeing, including the academic libraries. So when we speak with them, I know what we've seen as far as cuts in some of those areas, which are still 15 to 20% below the FY15 levels. So that's where we are on FY19, and then of course we'll still need to look forward beyond that. Some upcoming dates of interest. This coming Thursday, November 2nd, will be the Secretary White's Veterans Project celebration, which many public libraries are now participating through Project Next Generation. We actually see that expanding in the near future, with about almost 20 public libraries wishing to join us in this effort immediately, with doing interviews of veterans in their locations, which will be uploaded onto the Library of Congress's site and our YouTube channel to capture veterans' history and stories there. That's November 2nd. If anyone here has a family member or is a veteran yourself serving, please call our office if you'd like to attend. It is not a public event. We serve lunch to everyone, so we can't just open the doors wide. We have to have a count ahead of time, but certainly you're all invited if there would be a need or an interest to do so. November 16 is Family Reading Night. Information regarding that has been sent out to all libraries throughout the state. I think 3,600 libraries received material from our office on that. So we'll be looking now at where programs are going to occur and just see what impact that is. We look at all of the calendars surrounding libraries throughout the state and see what is being scheduled. There used to be a reporting mechanism. We no longer do that. We kind of proactively search for ourselves. The Secretary White will be at the Addison Public Library that evening for a reading event with children there, and also a book giveaway through the Illinois Literacy Foundation. So I have this in my notes, but I hate to say this. At the very end of November, and maybe early December now, we will make an announcement regarding the Emerging Writers poetry winners for FY18. Kevin Stein is the Illinois Poet Laureate, as many of you know. He has resigned from that position to move out of state. This will be kind of, our understanding, his last official act as Illinois Poet Laureate for the state, and he ultimately becomes the end judge for this, for after these poems are vetted by a committee. So he has a lot of influence. He attends that day, reads them. Even if you are not a big, let's say, reader of poetry or fan of poetry, when you attend this event, which you're all invited to, I would encourage you if you can. It will be at the State Library. It's a moving event. It's interesting, and you really, really appreciate what these writers put into their work on that day. And I don't think you see it or can appreciate it otherwise. It's really neat. So you'll hear more about that, and if you're interested, again, contact us. Anyone would be invited to attend that day to hear the poets and also to greet them and congratulate them. So I guess really questions for the State Library at this point. That's why we're here. We're glad we could be here today. It's always nice to see everyone in person instead of through a camera.
Feeling is mutual. No questions?
No questions.
Okay, thank you, Greg. We will move on to new business. And the executive committee recommendation to fill the vacancy of Harry Zipfeld. And this is an action requested. So the executive committee met on Friday, September 27th to interview 3 out of the 24 candidates to fill the vacancy of Harry Zipfeld. Harriet held an at-large seat and her term would expire on June 30th, 2019. The candidates we chose to interview were based on getting representation through Rails area and type of library. All 3 candidates were very qualified and would be valuable additions to the Rails board. The committee recommends that Laura Keys, Head of Adult Services and Technical Services at the Freeport Public Library, fill the at-large seat of Harriet Zipfeld, expiring June 30th, 2019. Ms. Keys has experience in working in school, public, academic, and special libraries, and the Freeport-Rockford area is currently not represented on the Rails board. Any discussion or questions for the executive committee? Okay, do we have any comments in Bolingbrook?
Just the board members.
Oh, sorry, I called that. Any comments in Burr Ridge?
Nope.
Cole Valley? Quincy?
No.
Anyone on the phone?
I think she sounds like a fine candidate. This is Dee Reynolds.
Okay. Hearing no comments, may I have a motion to accept the recommendation of the executive committee and appoint Laura Keys to fill the at-large seat of Harriet Zipfeld?
So moved.
I'll second it.
A second?
Yes.
Nadia seconded it.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carried. We will move on to Amanda with membership changes.
On October 16th, I visited Prairie Hill School District number 113 and determined this district meets Rails membership standards. I'd like to recommend the Rails board vote to recommend membership of this school district to the Illinois State Library. This library director, it's her first year with this school district, and she has already implemented several reading programs for students, and she's continuing existing reading programs. One that really struck out to me was their Million Word program. This is tracked through the Accelerated Reader program, and all students who have read 1 million words get a free book from the library, and they get recognized with their name on a poster that's prominently displayed in the library. I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions on this school district?
I have a question.
Okay.
On the library summary sheet, it says 133, and you said 113, so I just wanted to make sure we do the right.
Sorry.
that we.
It's 133. Yes, I said the wrong thing.
Okay.
Sorry. Yes, yes. Thanks for clarifying. Yes,
Okay,
yes.
just want to be sure we.
I'm getting my threes mixed up. Yeah. Yes, it's 133. Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. All right.
No questions, Laura.
Okay, so may I have a motion to approve the recommendation as presented and request final approval from the Illinois State Library?
I will move to accept Prairie Hill School District number 133.
Thank you. Can we have a second?
I'll second.
I'll second it. Joe.
Motion carries. Oh, we need to take a vote. Sorry about that. Let's take a vote. Emily, can you call the roll?
Sure.
Oh, I can do this by eyes and eyes. Oh, yes. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? No? Motion carries. Carried. Okay, we will move on to 8.3, revision of Rails compensation schedule. D?
Yes, thank you, Laura. We are asking the board to update our compensation schedule to keep it current and competitive. We haven't done this for the past 2 years. The information that we received from the Management Association is that it should have increased 2% in 2016 and then an additional 1.95% for 2017. I believe that we can make these annual adjustments for 5 years, and then we have to redo the whole, look at everything again. So you have a memo in the packet. This is not expensive. It basically helps the lowest paid staff, delivery staff, who are in particular who are at the current base rate. And there's also a few individuals who are maxed out, and they will also get modest increases. Any questions?
I was curious, those Management Association for Rails, because my library uses Management Association well, and we use similar data to adjust our salary scale. But I know they do it for public libraries. The data that they recommend how you adjust the scale, they do nonprofit organizations. I was curious, do they put Rails in the nonprofit category? Do they use the public library information?
When they did the benchmarking, it was a combination, I would say. Okay. It tended to be heavier on the nonprofit, as I recall, because we're not. We're more like that than like a library per se.
There are usually slight variations I've noticed between. They're not big. You're point something.
Right.
That difference. So I'm just curious which one.
So I'm assuming that they based it on whatever organizations they used for the benchmarking.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments or discussion on the phone? Okay, may I have a motion to approve the revisions to the Rails compensation schedule as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Emily, can you call the roll?
Sure. Christine Barr.
Yes.
Dave Barry.
Yes.
Sue Busenbark.
Yes.
Judy Crocker.
Yes.
Gwen Gregory.
Yes.
Paul Mills.
Yes.
Scott Poynton.
Yes.
Dee Runnels.
Yes.
Nadia Sheikh.
Yes.
Joe Skibinski.
Yes.
Laura Turner.
Yes. Okay, motion carried. D, please continue with the Human Resource Department reorganization.
Yes, thank you. So you probably recall that Barb Brooks, the prior Human Resources Director, left in the spring. He did not replace her. Jim very kindly took on the additional responsibilities of oversight of HR along with finance, which has been going quite smoothly, I would say. So since that time, we have been looking at dividing up some of the duties, some of the things that Barb did between the two human resources assistants. Obviously, there are also things that Jim has taken on and that supervisors across the organization have taken on. So at this point, we did ask the Management Association to interview the two staff in HR, Samantha Daly and Mary Hudspeth, and to develop new job descriptions based on what they discovered in the interviews. And their recommendation is that the positions be split, that there really are different kind of levels of duties in a sense, and to create two different positions, a human resources coordinator and a generalist. Sam will be grade 6 as a generalist. She also has a lot more HR experience in her background, and so the cost of this is less than $10,000, and our savings we estimate at least on not replacing Barb are around $70,000. So we're still to the good even with this, and I think just a sensible way to move forward. So I ask for your approval.
Dave?
Yes.
I have a question.
Yep.
The journalist and coordinator, what are the differences in those?
I think I have the job descriptions in here, but Jim might be better able to answer that. I think it's sort of a day-to-day kind of administrative versus
is more involved in the overall programs, the benefit programs and the administration of those, and the coordinator position is more day-to-day type of work, a bit more of the filing and the phone calls and so the basic type things.
HR has interesting. The nomenclature they use for positions is not the way you would normally think of the nomenclature.
Right.
Yeah, coordinator sounds like it would be
I know.
higher up.
I actually I made that mistake at one point. I confused them. I agree.
It's
something
unique to the field and the way they title positions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I had a question too.
Sure.
And I guess I don't know the history of this. Is this something that does require board approval?
This requires board approval because it requires a change in the organization chart, and because the board does approve the organization chart. And as and so we will revise the organization chart accordingly. We forgot that we had to also bring that to you when we were putting this together. That's the actual. This is.
I'll make the motion to approve this change.
I'll second it.
Okay. Do we have to do an I? Okay. Okay. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Okay. Motion carried. Okay. Next we have 8.4 Rails Board Committee charges. Kate Hall had asked that each board committee review their charges. Dee, would you like to lead this discussion?
Sure. So, as we As we mentioned earlier in the meeting, the consortia committee discussed its charge at the meeting. The memo in the packet provides some issues for you to consider as you discuss these charges. It might be helpful to talk a little bit about what the consortia committee discussion was, just to give you some insight into that. So maybe you'll help me with that, Mr. Chairperson Paul Mills, and also Gwen, who was there. There was some discussion about who the stakeholders were in the world of consortia, in the world of resource sharing, whether it was, that one of the problems specifically with the consortia committee charge and sort of that formation is that the voting is kind of unclear in terms of whether it's by consortium or by individual, because they tend to have two representatives. There are no established terms. So there's been a lot of turnover, which makes it hard to have the conversations as well. So what would you like to?
And I don't think it was in the packet, although you can find it on the Rails website because all this information is provided there. Rails staff did have several procedural changes to the consortia that I think were good and were approved by the consortia committee, and probably I think those recommendations are general enough they're probably applicable to other committees that the board has as well. The bigger picture item that I think the committee had a wonderful conversation about, and this kind of dovetails in with what Greg was talking about with resource sharing, is that some of the charges to the consortium committee around resource sharing, we don't have all the appropriate stakeholders at the table to have that conversation. Consortium members make up 25% of Rails membership. LSIP members make up approximately 25% of Rails membership. If you throw in independent consortia such as NIC and Rock River and Pinnacle, that takes you up to the mid-30s. But that still leaves 65% of members who truly aren't represented at that table when it comes to resource sharing. And that's, I think, something that in the conversation the consortium committee had said something the Rails board should consider. Most likely with Rails staff developing recommendations for looking at what is an appropriate venue to discuss resource sharing as a system as a whole and make sure everyone has a seat at that table. I thought it was a good conversation. I think I'll speak as just the consortia chair. I think our feeling is that we gave good guidance to the Rails staff to develop draft charges to bring to the Rails board for the consortia committee, but also another venue, whatever that may be, to look at those more system-wide resource sharing issues. A point I do want to make, a point that was made at the Rails consortia committee meeting is that the consortia, both the LSAPs and the other non-LSAP consortia, do represent a significant portion of the population of Rails. But as Dee very aptly pointed out, the grant funding that the state gives Rails, and of course Heartland, is an area and per capita grant that needs to also reflect the geographic area that we serve as well. Gwen, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think the beginning of that committee's had an interesting history. It began as the LSAP task force in the early days of the system, I guess I'll say. And it was really, in some ways, the first opportunity for these groups to come together in a room and talk to each other, as I understand it, Paul?
In an official capacity.
Yes. And so it was really, and then it was expanded to include the consortia, the independent consortia. And the group has been tremendously productive and helpful in bringing forth more sort of coordination and collaboration. And one of the documents or recommendations that was approved at the consortia committee this month were a set of recommendations about cataloging and training for cataloging that would be, consistent across the consortia. So, I mean, that's like a perfect example, I think, of what this group has been able to accomplish. But it has become clear to us, as we have discussed, for example, the overlay, which is not something that is necessarily as needed by consortium member libraries as it is by standalone libraries or libraries that aren't automated, that there were people who needed to be part of the discussion that just weren't there. And I think the committee recognized that themselves. And so that's the consortium committee. The delivery committee, and I'm going to stop talking after these two committees and let Jane talk too, because she was, she's very active with the consortium committee. The delivery committee has been in existence for, since the beginning of the system. And at this point, there is no committee chair. And I believe one of the long-serving members, Kathy Clare from Reddick, has retired. So the committee is very much in a state of flux. I wonder if this committee can be folded in under a kind of a larger resource sharing committee umbrella, because as you were saying, Greg, it's certainly related. I think a lot of what their charge has been done and has been operationalized, which is not to say that we don't need an advisory committee, but that's just another thing to think about with that. And then for the System Membership Standards Committee, that committee, I believe the work of that original committee, which was like 40 people, has been done. The draft standards were developed and are now being tested. There may be need for a different committee going forward or in the future to review the standards, or that may be a board job. I don't think that we need that particular committee to continue, and they have not met in a long time, just because it's become like a staff implementation project at this point. Jane, do you want to add anything about delivery and consortia in particular?
I would just echo, I think, what you and Paul have said. The big picture, certainly with consortia, is the need for broader representation in broad resource sharing issues. And in terms of delivery committee, I think it was very valuable as we streamlined delivery and made a number of changes, but I would agree that that's pretty much been operationalized at this point, and I could see its charge being absorbed by a broader resource sharing committee with perhaps formation of working groups if we needed to deal with specific and term limited issues or projects.
So there's no action being requested today. Kate had asked that we talk about it today, and that the board talk about it, and that the staff take any recommendations or suggestions from the board to develop possible new charges for action and discussion at the November meeting.
Dee, I would actually like to see the Rails staff develop a draft charge for a resource sharing committee. I think that would be really useful for the board to consider. And of course, with that, concurrent with that, I think the charge for the consortia committee would need to reflect the addition of a resource sharing committee to have a clear delineation between the expectations for what each committee would need to consider.
Dee,
Okey-doke, yes.
if I understand correctly, delivery is one of the largest portions of our budget.
Yes.
And that's why I'm listening to doing away with delivery committee. I understand going forward, but I'm kind of like, they should be addressed in some sort of charges about the next committee that would take over this. It's such an important part of our budget.
Okay, sure. I think I don't disagree with you. I guess I'm thinking that what they were charged with doing, perhaps we need to move on to, for example, the study that we're doing of the statewide delivery of, innovations in delivery, that kind of,
So many of the things the delivery committee has been doing would fold into the charge of that new committee. Is that what you're saying, Dave?
I was sitting down with some specifics about it, rather than just general language about it.
Yeah.
It can certainly include delivery as a a very prominent charge for that new committee. Make it clear that that's an ongoing responsibility that they have.
Yep.
May very well have, as Jane was talking about, have working groups, specific working
Right.
groups to look at different delivery issues as they come up.
Right. I mean, we certainly need and get, lots of feedback from members on a regular basis about delivery, but that doesn't take the place of a group that's really dedicated to that issue and focused on it. As members, I mean.
I would say, Dave, and I think the consortia committee is the only one that did working groups. Is that accurate to say?
I think that's right.
That is correct.
The working group model under the consortium committee, I thought, it's really worked well. Putting a smaller cohort together to address specific questions or concerns that come up, and then bringing that back to discussion for the larger committee has worked really well. The consortium committee is a large committee, and it's been easier to
Right.
see forward progress to happen with the smaller groups.
It just made sense. I mean, the cataloging recommendations, that was a working group, and they were put together by catalogers. So. All right, well, that's all very helpful. Those are great suggestions. Does anybody else have any suggestions? Or questions or comments? All right, well, I think I'll just say that we understand what you are looking for, and we will provide it in November.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're moving on to 8.5, paid family leave policy and retroactive implementation. Dee?
Yes, thank you, Laura. So I want to thank the board for approving the paid family leave policy in September. In some conversations since that time, we have thought that maybe it would be a better idea to make it retroactive to July 1st of this year, the beginning of our fiscal year. It is often something that we do when we make changes to salaries or benefits. I think that I would feel good that this would ensure that it was fairer, potentially, because naturally, we don't know what people's situations are. We don't want to know what their situations are, but this will allow us sort of a more level playing field, I think, by going back to the beginning of the fiscal year. So that is my suggestion, and I hope that the board will act on that.
This was one of the things that I was probably inartfully trying to talk about at our meeting last month. So I think this would be a wonderful thing to do and a really appropriate way to introduce this benefit for the rail staff. So I would make a motion to approve the retroactive implementation of the paid family leave policy as presented in the memo.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Not in favor, say no. Sorry. Okay, motion carried. All right. Next, we will move on to unfinished business. And Jane, can you give us an update on the overlay project?
Yes, thank you, Laura. You're welcome. So last month, you had in your packet a draft version of a Q&A document about the overlay project, and this month you have the completed version. The main changes there were expansion of some of the technical information based on feedback from Autographics. That completed document was also shared with the Consortia Committee on October 16th. And as you know, many of those questions did arise from the Consortia Committee back in July and August. We did not request a vote at the Consortia Committee because there was a lot of information to absorb, and we actually had 3 new members at that meeting. As Dee mentioned, we have had a lot of turnover at that committee, and this was another instance of that. But we did have a great discussion. And at the end of it, and Kate attended that, and at the end of the discussion, at Kate's suggestion, the committee members did agree that the working group recommendation could go directly to the board. I did explain to the Consortia Committee how we developed quotes, requested quotes from the vendors, so I wanted to touch on that today as well. It's very difficult to get a handle on the cost of projects like this. First of all, because there's a lot of unknowns. We don't know how quickly the project will expand. We don't know exactly which components we will offer. For example, there is an optional component to do searching of electronic resources, which does affect the cost if you choose to do that. And also, each vendor has a different way of pricing these. So in order to get apples to apples comparison as much as possible, we provided the vendors with sample data and 6 different scenarios. So we actually asked for quotes based on a test and training system, for a 10 library pilot, for a 20 library pilot, for a scenario with expansion within Rails, a scenario with statewide expansion, and finally, just for comparison purposes, one representing 100% participation just by consortia. When we evaluated quotes, we based the evaluation on the statewide expansion scenario because that was closest to what we hope the project will eventually become. So the quotes we got from Autographics for the pilot project, it didn't vary that much based on the number of libraries, but it was in the range of $660,000 over 2 years, which includes one-time costs, some annual costs, and also some development costs. But we do need to be clear that that is not the final price of it. We do need to go through contract negotiations to determine that. Our goal is, and my sense is, that we can reduce the cost of that pilot. Take a look especially at, if we want to include electronic resource searching in the pilot, and if so, which resources, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of assumptions in there, but our aim certainly is to do a good pilot at a cost that we certainly can afford, and we definitely think that that is feasible. So the recommendation from the working group back in July was to direct Rails staff to enter into contract negotiations with Autographics for use of their Share It product to expand resource sharing among Illinois libraries. So we are asking today for a motion and approval of that recommendation, and I would certainly be happy to answer any additional questions as well.
So in terms of the process, so this is a recommendation. This is not approving a contract or anything like that. It's just to, to allow us to move forward to the next step. We would certainly bring back if not the contract itself, the budget for the overlay for the board to approve. Just to, you're not, this isn't like the end of it. This is the beginning in a lot of ways.
Or I will make a motion to direct the rail staff to enter into negotiations with Autographics.
I would second that.
Okay. All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed? No? Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. On to 9.2, evaluation of rail services, preliminary report, member visits. D?
Yes, thank you. So back in 2016, maybe it was even before 2016, one of our former board members, Dean Ward from Illinois State, challenged us to not just count things that we do, but to really try to look at impact and outcomes. And so we thought that was a very good suggestion. And so we started working on that. And so this is the preliminary report of the first sort of evaluation, look at impact of rail services that we have done. And I want to thank Mary Witt very much and her staff for working on it. Got a little feedback going on there. Kendall, what are you up to?
I was told to move the mic.
Okay. All right. Forgive you then. Kidding. Okay, so, just to be very clear, this evaluation is about impact. It's not about whether something is good or bad. We know that these visits and many of the services that we provide are valued and well used, but it certainly is a good idea to try to get some actual data on that, and then to make changes as they may be needed. So we decided to focus first on member visits because it's something it's very sort of concrete and a discrete service we can look at. And so essentially, as Mary writes on the first page down near the bottom, we're looking at what members do differently as a result of the visit and if they are better off after receiving a member visit than they were before. So this document takes you through the process, and they did have particular questions. They did a pre-survey and a post-survey of library visits during a particular period of time this year, which, if you would just read, April through October. And you will see as you read through this that generally speaking, people, as I said, were very happy about the visits to begin with, but that we did learn that there were things that we could do differently. And we also learned that the people do tend to use these services more after a visit than they did before. So we did also find out that, things that directors or, library staff didn't actually know about Rails that we would have thought they would know and that we wanted them to know. So at the end of the document, last couple pages are recommendations for moving forward. both in general and then for the visits themselves. We definitely want to do more evaluation. We think that it is very appropriate for us as a taxpayer-funded organization in particular to really analyze our services and activities to be sure that they are being done and that they are in the best way for members and that they are what members truly need. So we're going to continue to collect pre-visit checklist data and continue to try to get as many staff members at a library to participate in the visit as we can. We're going to continue to examine the processes involved in planning the visits and promoting the visits. And I think one of the interesting things that we learned was that sometimes the visit could be anxiety inducing for people, which was not something that we had ever thought about. But it's like, we don't want people to think that we're going out there to check up on them. We're going out there to make sure that they know about our services. So there's very specific process things, but there's also just the way that they're gone about. I remember when I went to Bartlett to Dave's, I was pleased, but somewhat shocked. That's too strong a word, but it wasn't just Dave and me and Carolyn Nance, the director. It was the whole entire library staff, pretty much, a number of board members, and that was a great opportunity. But that didn't always happen on a visit, and so those kinds of opportunities are really terrific, and that's one of the things that Debbie and Mary discovered. So, as I say, this is just a preliminary report. I think it's really interesting. It's a lot of work, but it's well worth doing. I think that libraries in general often try to do this as well. I know that assessment is a big deal in academic libraries in particular. So,
is it typically the library and the library assistant library director that are you're meeting with, or
I would say that it is typically
usually
the director.
Sometimes the assistant directors. They often take us around and introduce us to the rest of the staff, but the actual sit-down meeting is usually with the director. We'd like to expand that, though, as Deirdre was saying.
Because then the entire more of the staff hear about the services, and particularly as they may apply to them.
And they might be more willing to fill out the survey than the director.
It's possible. Yeah. And again, it just improves relationships with people.
If I could just add to that, we often see the director, and the directors read our e-news, and we see the directors at our exhibit booths. We have heard from the other staff in other positions that they don't know as much about real services as a director. So we really are trying to target that group with all of our communication efforts. So what you say is a very good point.
Any other comments or questions? We're going to keep working on it.
All right. We'll move on to board development and the ILA conference. Did any board members attend the ILA conference or have any feedback on their experience?
Yes.
Well, I was there because I'm on the ILA board, but I was there for one day. It was wonderful. I thought it was great. The location was fantastic, and just all the programs that I attended were really great.
And then you were in Tinley Park again last week, I bet, too, right?
Actually, Islama was...
Oh, no, it was in Springfield. Why do I keep thinking it's in Tinley Park? I wanted to be in Tinley Park. Anyway.
Next year.
All right, that must be it.
I was also there. I presented a program, was there for a couple days, and visited the Rails booth and saw some of the Rails staff there.
I was there also.
Yes, for a very important reason. Trustee of the Year.
Thank you.
Congrats.
The more I attend these conferences, the more I seem to get out of them. I mean, I try to go to conferences or sessions regarding trustees, but I also made time to go to one that was put on by Ruth Ann, who's our youth director, and a couple other individuals, and learned what they can do with $500 in a quarter. Librarians are fantastic when it comes to handling money. And I like this information because I can go back to my board and tell them, this is good stuff. These people are on their job.
Yeah. It's great to have the board members go. It's great to have trustees in general at the ILA conference. And it's a great experience for Rails. I mean, we would see so many of our members, and are able to talk with them and explain services to them.
They love spinning your guys' wheel too.
Yeah, I know.
All right, we'll go to Rails board member reports. Do any board members have news about their library they would like to share?
I will. The Fountaindale Public Library District took delivery of our new outreach services vehicle. So in addition to a bookmobile, we now have a sprinter-sized vehicle that we use for lobby stops, both at senior centers, memory care units, schools, pickups that are remote book drops. We had a wonderful ribbon cutting ceremony on Saturday, and we had one of our state representatives there at the ribbon cutting, so that was really nice. We had a gorgeous day, and I'm really happy to say that vehicle's in service, visiting lots of places, bringing books and materials, and a Wi-Fi hotspot, and soon computers for classes at different locations in our community as well.
And speaking of your state rep, actually, it reminds me that, right, Pat McGuire?
And yes, actually, Pat McGuire is one of our state
senators. That he was at ILA. He and a senator from Urbana did a great program on advocacy, what they want to hear as the recipients of us advocating, and that was incredibly useful, and I think something that if Rails could repeat it, or they could, I hope they will do it again at ILA. It was something that everybody in the library world should hear, I think.
Senator Pat McGuire actually had a sheet. I think it was top 10 ways to communicate with your legislature about issues and the best way to make sure your message gets across, which was a wonderful document. It was a pleasure to have Senator McGuire there, and he was there, I should note, on his birthday too. He was presenting at ILA. He's a good guy.
Yeah, it was an excellent program.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Representative Kathleen Willis was also there. She was part of a panelist called Who Should Run? Library Workers in Public Office. And for those of you who don't know her, she is a librarian, so it was very good to have her there as well.
Absolutely.
This is Laura. Something our library has coming up. We have been asked to participate in Caterpillar's it used to be Introduce a Girl to Engineering, but now it's Introduce a Girl to STEM Day. The library will be a stop on their visit. We will have 500 girls, 8th grade girls, over 2 days, and we will be talking to them about how working engineers use libraries in their careers, plus doing some activities.
That is great.
Yeah. Anyone else have any news they'd like to share?
I do. Sue from Kiwani. Tomorrow night we're having our annual, what we call Music at the Carnegie, which was developed by former director John Sayers. And it's a social hour, dinner, followed by music. And tomorrow night we're having 2 blues guitarists as our entertainment.
Wonderful.
Yes, they do. We do have alcohol.
Somebody
said that. I heard you.
Somebody want to make a motion to
No, I was going to
So it's a very well attended community activity. So usually sold out.
And we can have alcohol thanks to Scott's legislative leadership.
It's legislative
leadership.
It's funny.
Anyone else? Okay, we will go to agenda building for the next Rails Board meeting. The next meeting is Friday, November 17th at the Burr Ridge Service Center. Note that this is the third Friday of the month to allow for the Thanksgiving holiday. And policy changes and follow-up on committee charges may be on the November agenda.
Yes.
Okay, so we are at adjournment. So all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Is anyone opposed? Okay. We will adjourn. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Laura.
Laura.